clock on the wall tells us it's time for another episode of Learn, Teach, Lead, where we explore how educators just like you are using innovative instructional strategies, including how to leverage AI to improve teaching and learning.
Each week, we share real classroom stories, tools, and tips to help you save time, personalize instruction, and lead with confidence.
I'm Jeanine Nostrum, an elementary school principal.
And I'm Robyn D'Angelo, an elementary school teacher. Let's get started with today's Friday debrief.
Well, Robyn, we always start with our fabulous moment of the week, and this week is no exception. I'm going to share a real quick one, and then I know we have a fabulous moment that we both agree was a standout this week. So one of the things that I am really very grateful for here, working with all these amazing teachers, is the conversations that we have together. And this week, during one of our MTSS meetings, it sort of turned into a mini professional development. I had mentioned to I've mentioned to the committee that I have been doing a little bit of research on how digital learning impacts the brain, and we were talking about executive functioning and how ADD and ADHD are sometimes identified as a problem, but really the bigger problem is executive functioning. And that led our speech teacher into a whole explanation of the impact of executive functioning, and how certain deficits in that area can be addressed. And everyone around the table was just so engrossed in all of the information she was sharing and the depth of knowledge that she had. And it was just such a nice opportunity to carve out some time to learn from one another. And it was really, for me as a principal, just a fabulous moment to engage in this really deep professional discussion with people whose opinions and experience I have a lot of respect for. So a lot of times we get caught up in just checking boxes and rushing through all the things we have to do. It was just nice to step back and take some time for that professional discourse. So that's my fabulous moment of the week.
I love that. And I'm going to follow you right with this, still collaborating and articulating with all of our colleagues, which we wrapped up our GROW PLC this week. And over the last 6 months, a group of teachers got together and we came up with a shared mission. And that was to really look at the data and see how we can have our students grow as learners. So using this GROW framework, where we gather data, we refocus, we organize, and we watch students for growth. And we do that all the time as teachers, but we added that AI piece into it. We really had meaningful conversations where we kind of really dove into the work, and we asked, what do we need to do next? Where can we better support the students? Looking at ourselves as a mirror to model what we can do in order to support our students, looking for intentional teaching refinements that we can put into our practices and really come together to share ideas, to share best practices. And it really was an amazing 6 months. So I have to say, if you have a PLC that you are running in your classrooms or buildings, this was really a full circle one for us. And I felt like I saw what we were doing back in the teachers' classrooms. And that's amazing when you can sit and talk in a meeting or a group with teachers, and we take it back into the classroom and come back with feedback and how to adjust our practices. Those conversations are what lead our students to success, and they're so meaningful. And one of my favorite parts is we left with a little cactus at the end of the meeting, because our teachers are so resilient and wonderful teachers that can really bring to the table those meaningful conversations and get the work done in their classroom. So I thought a cactus was the perfect parting gift for them, because I think of them as resilient teachers and wonderful people to work with. So our PLC is ended, but still going strong in our classrooms. And that's my fabulous moment of the week.
That's great. I agree. And, a cactus can thrive in even the most difficult of environments. And sometimes the challenges that teachers face are big. But this continually looking at each situation and each learner with a growth mindset, gathering information, refining instruction, organizing it to maximize efficiency, and then just watching the progress and starting the cycle all over again. We have found, obviously, we've always done something like that, but we found that doing it as a group and leveraging AI to help us where necessary has made a tremendous amount of difference. And it's so nice to walk through that process with the teachers, but then to really see how it's just become a part of our practice. And you have a perfect example for that, our topic for this week, which is, how you were looking at your student data. Obviously we've been using that ICE-T method. We've been supporting kids thinking by adding in those 3M questions, the what does it mean, make it your own, why does it matter? And now when you looked at your data for the kids in fourth grade, tell us a little bit about the insights that you gained and how you've adjusted the model to meet the needs of the current students that you have.
Absolutely. And, this grow really came to life in my class this week. Like you said, I was looking at the data. Now, I looped with some of my students from third grade to fourth grade. So I'm very well aware of their work habits. And as a teacher, I'm consistently observing them and using my teacher lens to do so. But there are certain times where I do take their writing and I run it through an AI software in order to get that non-biased opinion and look for trends. Because one thing that we've learned about AI is that it's great for looking at big pieces of data, large amounts of data, and organizing it for us, more so than sometimes my brain can even handle with 23 students. So I did that this week, and we did a piece of writing, and I looked at the results. And now in third grade, we had our 3Ms, which was our depth of knowledge that you had mentioned, with the ICE-T as we planned for our writing. But something still was not there. And I feel like we had this conversation a year ago, and we said, something is still not there in third grade. And we're having the same conversation this year based on the data that came up. And in third grade, we were thinking of those M's for the depth of knowledge, thinking, and planning our students how to do for writing literary analysis. Well, in fourth grade, a couple of them were coming up with, approaching benchmark. Most of them were meeting, some were exceeding. And I was looking at the data, and it showed very clearly a trend across the students who were approaching and also meeting, that their analytical piece of the writing was not quite mature enough to reach that benchmark and above the benchmark, exceed the benchmark for, just say, a state assessment that we would be doing, this year. So when we're looking at this as a teacher, we say, okay, now what do we have to go back to refine? They already have their 3Ms, their depth of knowledge. They're doing a great job with that. So after riffing with ChatGPT for a little bit, I came up with a fourth M. And I was like, that's it. That's the missing piece. The fourth M, which is, what is the message that the reader should leave knowing, which is theme, right? So that's the theme that we teach them. But that fourth sentence within their writing of how they tie that message back to the theme that they're comparing between a character analysis or a theme of two books or two pieces of, two pieces of literature or two pieces of, a poem and a video. What is that theme? That's what they were missing. So when I was looking at the trend, I said, well, guess what? 4Ms, fourth grade. And I adjusted my teaching practice to put that enhancement in this week of that fourth M. When they're writing now, they will do, what does it mean? Be basically based on their prompt or their question or their claim. Why does it matter? Make it your own. And what is that message that the reader wants you to know, or the author wants the reader to know, when you're done reading this piece of comparison literature? And that is what's going to push them, hopefully, to benchmark and beyond. Now, that's a fourth grade skill. That analytical thinking is a much more mature skill. That's why we didn't do it in third grade. but looking at the trend. Now, could I have seen that as a teacher? Absolutely. I see it all the time as a teacher. But in 20 minutes, I was able to look at 20 pieces of writing, look for trends across that writing, and come up with a plan for the next day. When I tell you the next day, literally, I did it yesterday in my class, for the next day to put in that piece. And the kids, because they knew the 3 M's, now we're getting even yummier with our 4 M's, they were able to adapt to it so quickly because of that structured plan that they carried over from 3rd to 4th. And again, structure, we want the kids to find their writing voice, but sometimes they need that foundation. And this is an enhancement to build, again, the foundation now from going from 4th to 5th grade.
Yes. Yeah, and that's wonderful, Robyn. And as you were talking, I was thinking to myself, just for you as a teacher, having that, planting the seed that, all right, the area we need to lean into now, the next logical step for them in writing is this application and analysis. Like, what's the message? How does this apply to my own life? That's a more sophisticated comprehension skill. So now you can weave that into classroom discussions, shared read alouds, things like that. And just knowing that, I think, it's not like, oh, now I have to teach a lesson on this. It's no, now everything that I do, I'm going to be leaning towards helping them develop this higher level thinking. And as we've mentioned before, a lot of this is comprehension work, and we're just demonstrating their ability to read with comprehension through their writing. They've read, understood, thought about it, have some significant thoughts to share, and they do that through writing. So I just think that's a wonderful example of continually increasing the rigor and maintaining high standards for kids. So fantastic.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to see the results, as we continue on in 4th grade, to see, these little enhancements in how they are helping support the student is truly the most important piece of our job. So just finding that trend, I was so excited, to find that trend. Like, this is what teachers get excited for, where, I'm at home like, yay, I found the 4 M, and just to kind of put that in there and have that excitement that you can come back and do that with your kids the next day. And it's not a week later,
Sure.
that's the other thing with AI, it takes a while to grade 20 writing assignments again, and we do so all the time, but to just find that trend all the way across the board is quick with AI,
Sure.
so those are the areas that I feel are strengthening a teacher's best practice, finding those little enhancements that will be so impactful in their future is, that's key.
Sounds good. So what actionable takeaway do you have for our listeners today?
I truly feel that I love working with colleagues, and I truly feel that go find one from the grade below you and the grade above you, and look for that language, that vocabulary. Don't reset every year. Continue. So I'm in 4th grade, talk to your 3rd grade teachers, talk to your 5th grade teachers, have that vertical conversation and find that what is going to stick, because as teachers, we work hard. And if we don't have to always reteach the lesson and always have to start at the beginning, it will give us time to do more impactful things with our students. So if we work with a grade level below and a grade level above, and I know time is a constraint in teachers will say, well, where's the time? Where do we find the time? I don't know. I don't have that answer, but we have to. And we have to find the time to have that meaningful conversation like you did at your MTSS meeting, because those are the conversations that are going to take the skill that is learned in one grade and carry it to the next and to the next. Fractions, for example, not even writing, is a standard in all of the grades. But where's the common vocabulary? Where's the common lesson? Where's the transferable skill that you're taking so that they're buildable and not reteachable all the time? That's my power move of the week.
Sounds good. And I think my power move of the week would be targeted towards building leaders to try and be attentive to and aware of the different areas of interest that your teachers have, and then try and create opportunities or moments where they can share their areas of passion and their learning with their colleagues. I think that building leaders will find that teachers are naturally curious. They are often doing outside research on their own about topics that interest them, like this speech teacher who was exploring executive functioning. We have a reading specialist who has, developed quite a bit of expertise in the impact of digital literacy. So just making little opportunities for them. It doesn't have to be anything big, but just to share what they've been learning and keeping that professional conversation going. I think that's a really great power move for building leaders and informal leaders as well.
And that's why your school runs so well, Jeanine, because you
Oh,
do that every day.
thank you. Thank you. And so I guess that old clock on the wall is telling us it's time to wrap up another episode of Learn, Teach, Lead, the Friday Debrief. We've shared a few lessons, unpacked a few stories, and maybe sparked a few new ideas for your classroom or your leadership journey.
As always, we hope you take what you've learned, teach it forward, and lead with purpose. Thanks for spending part of your week with us. We'll see you next time.
Bye.